I'd say good morning, but only good morning to some of you. Hey.
Definitely morning here. Where are you based, Jonathan?
We're based out of Toronto mostly.
Oh yeah. Okay.
There's some people in New York and out in BC, but most of our teams in Toronto.
I feel like OpenFeature has a good proportion of like Canadian representation.
Todd, Todd and us, yeah.
I don't think it's
Kavind,
just you and Todd.
Kavind is Canadian,
I know.
and I feel like there's somebody else
I do
besides
too.
even Dev Cycle. I feel like there's somebody else who's Canadian, but I can't remember. Before
Michael's
what we're
pretty much Canadian. Detroit's pretty much Toronto, I believe. Southern Toronto.
while we're waiting to get started, I had the weirdest experience the other day. I don't know if you guys are following this GameStop meme stock thing. Yeah, Ben is. I think I know Ben is because I have him on Twitter. But uh, the I find it very interesting. Just the whole saga is very interesting to me. And I got into like one of these calls with like a whole bunch of people talking about GameStop, and it was actually like Martin Shkreli. I don't know if you guys know who this is. Uh, but the reason I mention it here is because Kelsey Hightower was talking to Martin Shkreli about GME for some reason. I was like, what kind of weird crossover is happening here? But
Yeah,
Kelsey
two worlds
Hightower
collide.
for like, and then they had a huge back and forth of like, is this for real?
Wild. Isn't Martin Scully supposed to be in prison?
He's out
No,
now. He served
yeah,
six.
he got out. Yeah, he's a
He's the
really
pharmacy
kind of
bro, right?
crazy, interesting, weird freak guy. But
Yeah.
he's clearly like, yeah, I don't know. He's clearly pretty intelligent, but I think he's intelligent and bored, which is a dangerous combination.
Yeah. Especially someone who uses his power for evil like that.
I mean, I think he just did it because he was bored, to be honest.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, that's our off-topic stuff for today. I couldn't help it.
That is really weird.
If anyone's interested, you can ping me. I'll send you the what do you call it? The X meeting. Okay, so we might be short and sweet today because there's only a couple things on the agenda. The thing I really wanted to make sure that we covered was KubeCon, specifically the OpenFeature Summit. So basically, there's two CFPs coming. This is KubeCon NA, which is in Salt Lake City. If you're interested in submitting a talk, you better hurry. You have like 3 days to do it. So you can drop everything and submit. Although just submitting an abstract is actually pretty easy if you have some idea of what you want to talk about. So I'd encourage you to do that if you're interested in going. And then the other thing is OpenFeature Summit. So I'll put, actually, I have links for both of these that I'll put here. OpenFeature Summit. So OpenFeature Summit is basically what it sounds like. It's an event. It's like a, I forget what they call them, like a bonus events or whatever, like offsite events or something. They're still close to the venue, but they're essentially like community specific events. So we have one this year, a co-located event, so that's what they're called. We have one this year at KubeCon NA specifically for OpenFeature. There's lots of opportunities to talk there. Basically, if we don't get good participation, both in terms of speakers and attendance, it won't happen again. But yeah, so consider it if you're interested, especially if you're relatively close. And I'm totally willing to help like review talks or give feedback or anything like that if you guys want support there. So those are the things I wanted to mention about KubeCon. Any questions about that? Cool. And then there's the tracking update. So we have a PR here, 260 in the spec. It's really one of those like high level PRs to talk about goals. I need to get back to it and clean it up some because there's been lots of comments. But I've had to pivot a little bit to internal tasks recently, and I'll be getting back to some spec work and open source stuff, including this. So this is going to be a top priority of mine. If you haven't read that, if you'd like to leave any more feedback on tracking, please do so there. It's something that's come up a whole bunch of times. I know Ryan from Launch Darkly was really interested in it recently. Ryan mentioned, for instance, it's one of the big things that Launch Darkly customers can't really do right now with OpenFeature. So it's important for them. Mike was in a conversation with eBay, and they were talking about how it's something they're really interested in as well. So it's important. Just try and leave whatever feedback you have there. It's also relatively simple and small, I think, at this as far as I can tell. So it's going to be a high return on investment, I think, in terms of specification enhancement. Any questions on that one? Cool. Okay. Yeah, that's really it for me. So we can move on to Jonathan with the multi-provider stuff.
Yeah, I don't have too much, but yeah, we have the server-side JavaScript, I guess, in the Node.js multi-provider. I think it's approved now. Probably merge that the next day or two. We also have a client-side version of that, which is similar, but sort of due to the async versus like synchronous semantics difference, they are going to be like separate multi-providers. But so Emma has that ready to publish once we just wanted to get the main one through first before publishing that one. And then I guess they only open, and we have, I think, a couple blog posts that we're ready to publish. The only other question we had was like where do we want the docs for this to live on the OpenFeature website? Like what would be the best spot for that? I think Michael said like potentially like an appendix or yeah.
Yeah, an appendix isn't a bad idea for like a really rough spec. Like I say spec, but I don't think it has to be anything nearly as rigorous as like the main specification. Like we have a kind of sub spec for additional utilities, including the in-memory provider, and I feel like it could be there as an optional utility that's just roughly spec'd.
Is it more like, are you thinking more like kind of like reference documentation, or more like a guide, like, you know, of philosophical kind of approach to using the thing, or both?
I'd have to chat with Adam on it. I think it's more probably closer to a spec. It's not as, I think it's taking the technical documentation that we put together to sort of start this project and kind of putting that in a place where it can live. It's definitely not as like rigorous as as the spec is written. But it is, I think it is enough technical documentation for somebody to go build another language off of it. So
yeah, I think like some rough technical language that would aid in an additional implementation is exactly what we want. That combined with some blog posts and an entry in like the ecosystem page, I think is a good place to start.
sure.
I'm like slightly nervous about putting it in the specification like area of the website, just because I think that there's like, I think someone who's not super plugged into the background of it might interpret it as like, this has to be done as part of implementing OpenFeature in my language. And I feel a bit like particularly sensitive about it because it's something that's come up a lot recently when we've been talking about kind of like what we want to do better as a project overall, is like not kind of like forcing maintainers to kind of jump through a bunch of hoops every time we add something to the spec. I know that that's not the case for this, but so maybe I'm like overly sensitive on that, but yeah, I feel like it might be better to not put it in the specification part.
If it's in an appendix and the appendices are maybe kind of called out in a different way, or maybe hosted even in a different location on the site, do you think that's a decent solution, or do you think it should just be, do you feel like it shouldn't be in the spec?
I think if it was up to me, I would say not in the spec for now, not in that area, and just put it in somewhere else in the just the general part of the docs. But I'm not super passionate about it. It's just I don't have a super strong opinion. It's just I think that's, yeah, like I said, I'm feeling a bit sensitive about it just because of the conversations recently about things keep on getting added to the spec.
Maybe if we're
So-
more explicit on that appendix that like these are optional things.
Sure.
Would make it better. I don't know. Because there is like an appendix A that are kind of like optional utilities, right?
Yeah,
Already.
yeah. I mean, definitely, yeah. I'm like looking at it now, and it doesn't when you're looking
Doesn't
at
say
it.
optional enough.
No. I mean, like, I mean, I agree with you. Like it clearly is like, this stuff is all kind of specky, languagey, like musts and haves and stuff like that. And um, this this clearly feels like less formal, but it's sometimes surprising how often people interpret things in ways that you wouldn't expect. Like, oh, it's in this part of the document of the site, or it's in this repo, so therefore it must be a requirement. But we've already got the off-rep stuff in here, which I don't think is a core part of the spec. I'm not this is not something I'm like have a super strong kind of like opinion on it. Just my 2 cents. But I think it sounds like other people may be more keen to put it in this part.
Lucas, you wanted to say something? You raised your hand.
Yeah, I was wanted to say something like similar, because I think last time when we've discussed it in the governance TC/GC meeting, I think we also said that it's fine to have something where it's pretty clear that this is like optional, something that we just spec'd, but we didn't spec it for the main spec. And I think I would be fine with that. I think the appendix seems quite good for that. And we have the right wording for that currently. So I'm not worried about it. I would be super worried if it would be not in that part. Like then
Yeah.
I guess it would be wrong. But yeah, that was just
Okay.
like my thought to that.
Well, maybe
Sounds
we
like
can meet in the middle and at least increase the clarity of the purpose of these appendices, and like make sure they're really treated as optional extensions. I'm sure we can do that somehow. Any other comments on the multi-provider stuff? Okay, Thomas?
Yeah, so off-rep related, we some I think weeks ago now we've designed this configuration endpoints that allow to configure how the provider acts based on the vendor, and we had some debate on the PR on when to call it in a flow of the provider. So since it was a bit hard to decide asynchronously, we have a meeting tomorrow for anyone want to join. It's at 5 European time, but feel free to join if you want. You have the link, and if you want to be added to the invite, let me know. I can invite you. But really, the goal is to be sure what is the minimal feature set we want for off-rep, and if we have this configuration endpoint when we call it, to be sure that it's not like adding too much load on the off-rep, basically. So we want to look at it all together tomorrow.
Yeah,
Thanks
I
for
was looking at that new configuration endpoint early in the week too. So.
I think we all see the value of the configuration endpoint is more like when we call it, like, is it a mandatory thing or not? Is it all of this that we want to discuss? Is it the first thing we do when we initialize a provider? And this is all the question we want to answer. Not is it needed, but more when we call it and how we use it.
Cool. Yeah, sounds like a good discussion to have. I was talking to Mike a little bit about it, and I haven't been super involved in OFREP, but it sounds like an important one. Okay, and with that, we've come to the end of the agenda. Does anybody else want to add anything? Say anything?
If we have a couple minutes, it might be good to like brainstorm what some good potential discussion topics for like KubeCon talks or OpenFeature talks would be. Like if anyone has any ideas and of the types of things that would be good for that situation. Obviously, like I think we're planning on putting together a multi-provider talk for the OpenFeature what's it called, summit and some other, and trying to think through a couple other things. But yeah, if anyone else has any ideas that of things that would be good, especially for like I'm trying to put together a KubeCon talk in the next day or two, or at least a proposal. If anyone has good ideas for what would be good for that audience, go for it. Hey, Thomas.
Yeah, I think maybe OffRep could be one of them, because I think it's not something we never presented to any KubeCon. Unfortunately, I think I cannot join KubeCon in the US, but if someone wants to do it, like I'm happy to help preparing it.
I'll take some notes here as we go. So I think this is an interesting idea, and we can all obviously follow up on this async, but I think it's a good idea to just put something down and talk about it.
I think for the multi-provider thing, there's like a bunch of different things you could talk about. There's like the more kind of technical stuff, but there's also just, I think it'd be interesting to talk through like the patterns that it enables, like migrations and integrating multiple providers, like the idea of having, I don't know, yeah, there's a bunch of different, I think it would be, you could almost get a couple of talks out of it, or like a talk of two parts around like the technical kind of what it is, and then what it unlocks in terms of different usage patterns. So I think that's the thing that whenever I see people talking about feature flags, the thing that I'm most often struck by is people rediscovering the same kind of patterns over and over again. Like even like the multi-provider thing, we've like had, you know, the reason we've finally started really, I think, focusing on it is because like 7 different people were saying, well, I've been thinking about doing this thing. So I know when I think about conference talks, I think about like what's stuff that feels fairly obvious if you've been doing feature flagging at like 2 or 3 places, but would be really valuable for people who've just started doing it.
Like just talking through common feature flagging patterns, that could be really, like it might be somewhat general, but maybe even for KubeCon that could be interesting. I'm just trying to think
like testing for like feature flag testing patterns. Actually, I might just put in a talk proposal for that, because I think that's a really classic one where there's about 4 or 5 kind of key things that if you've had to do it for any length of time, you kind of, everyone stumbles across the same kind of key ideas. But if you've never done it before, it's like, whoa, I never thought of doing that.
That's one that comes up a lot even internally at Dynatrace.
Yeah.
So one thing which can be maybe interesting is the differences between backend and frontend feature flagging. There are some crucial differences, and they are not obvious.
Yeah.
And the second, I think, thing which is now pretty hot in my organization is that the bigger the team is, the more obsolete or old flags they have, and how to deal with them. This is maybe not strictly related to OpenFeature, but this is extremely hard and complex problem.
It is the thing that everyone struggles with.
Oh, yeah.
That's true.
It's just like branches. It's easy to create them. It's hard to merge them.
Exactly.
I'll try and be Max's voice here. He's had some comments.
Oh.
Well, so one talk he said would be nice would be implementing an internal provider to manage your current in-house feature flagging solution. We choose to do that first, then adopt OpenFeature first before migrating to a vendor.
Yeah.
So basically going through the basics of how to how the provider interface works, how to set up basically how to hook up your internal feature flagging system to OpenFeature. And maybe that could align with some of the OFREP stuff as well. Because that could be a good way to do that.
I can't make KubeCon. I'd like to go actually. I think there is some flags with folk going to be there, but it's my wife's 50th birthday, literally like day 2, so definitely not happening. Someone suggested I take her with me to Salt Lake City.
Yeah, happy
that's not
birthday to
happening
Salt Lake
either.
City. It's a great place to celebrate your 50th birthday.
With a load of nerds. Yeah, that's not happening. So but I mean my just as a really simple, maybe live demo, 40-minute coding demo of like moving from, I don't know, an imaginary provider to OpenFeature, I think would be, I always find the talks at KubeCon are like always kind of like level 11 difficulty and complexity. And maybe a lot of people would still just be interested to know something just from the ground up, like, you know, swapping out a provider in 30 minutes. That would be my recommendation.
And I think like the low hanging fruit thing is always like, do you have some really cool use case, some example of an organization like using feature flagging, for example, for their trying out new algorithms in data science and how they get better. And so like, I think there are some use cases. Also, I thought about it, talking about something, but not North America, because I won't be able to come. But that's something I could imagine talking about. Like we had 1 or 2 customers where we did that, and it was really, really helping. And I think it's like really cool to show it's not about about changing colors in the front end or so, but really like getting the values out of it. I could imagine something like this being really, really cool. And then together with OpenFeature and all the ecosystem stuff.
Yeah, kind of along those lines, one of the things I was thinking, and I think somebody else said it, I guess common feature flagging patterns, but kind of an extension on that. Like, I think that at least in our org, I've seen a lot of different use cases, and everybody has almost their own, everybody in the org has almost their own like myopic sounds negative, but I don't mean it negatively, but their own like focused understanding of how they can use them. So like security wants them to disable swaths of features like a kill switch, and UI wants it to like roll out new features, and then like some other people want it for some experimentation. And obviously these are all valid use cases, but I think like having a presentation that really kind of enumerates all of these and shows like how they're all totally different, but kind of solved by the same overall idea, it could be really cool. Thomas, I think you're next.
Yeah, related to that, I think also one use case that I always like to highlight is like having one flag used by multiple microservices or like front end and back end at the same time, meaning that you can change the behavior of your whole application in a distributed system with one action. And I think this is also a game changer for most of the people that are just using deployment of configuration, because you have to deploy 10 services to have the same thing, and here you just change one flag value and you have it. So, and it's kind of related to what you said, Todd. You can use that example to go into what is to do it in front end, in back end, and like even in an infrastructure level where you can say, I do specific routing based on that, on this kind of thing.
Yeah, one of the things that I think could be interesting too is it's more of a front end thing that we do now, but like in Next.js and a lot of the more modern front-end frameworks where you're sort of mixing client-side rendering and server-side rendering. We've implemented in our SDKs the ability where you can conditionally render your code using feature flags in your backend. So you don't actually ship, like one of the big problems with client-side feature flagging is that you're shipping all of these flags and all this code to your front end that's then sort of getting evaluated in the front end. It's pretty easy for people on Twitter and things like that to go and inspect and find out what features you have in your front end code, where with a lot of these like frameworks like Next, where you can do server-side rendering, you can conditionally sort of render chunks of your website and only sort of ship the stuff that the user is supposed to see to their client.
Ooh, that's very interesting.
Mhm.
That's a pretty cool idea. I guess you could probably even do that too with asynchronous module loading. Even if you were doing client-side rendering, you could put an asynchronous module load behind a feature flag, which would also be, I mean, same idea, but yeah, interesting. I've never thought about that before.
Yeah, the what Thomas is talking about with the microservice migration, that actually might be a good KubeCon talk, because you could use some Kubernetes things and like show a Kubernetes demo where you do this type of like migration using a feature flag, and it might actually get accepted because it's actually like a more DevOpsy use case rather than a lot of the other use cases we have.
While that's true, I know that SDLC is really like something the CNCF is trying to get into more. So more app development, I think, makes it somewhat easier for us. But of course, anything that's SRE, more SRE focused is always going to be welcome at KubeCon. Very cool. Interesting ideas. Okay, well, let's keep this discussion going. Maybe I'll start a thread in OpenFeature in the channel, and we can dump some of this stuff in there. But that'll be a good place for us to, like, if you just think of something, you can throw it in there. Because we have a few more days for KubeCon, and then yeah, a decent amount more time for the OpenFeature Summit.
Yeah, I'll probably post for review, like in the channel, what I'm looking to submit. People happy to get any edits on it if people who have more experience with these talk proposals in the coming days. I know we only have until Sunday.
One other thought for people, if you're putting in the effort to write an abstract or actually build a talk, almost every one of these would also be a good blog post. And like, if you write the talk, then doing the blog post is kind of like, if you're going to do one, then the other one, it kind of makes the other one easier. So something to think about is, if you're thinking about this enough to write a good abstract, then maybe just keep thinking about it a little bit longer and write it down, and then
just throw the abstract into ChatGPT and say, turn this into a blog.
Exactly.
Anyway, okay. Anything else before we call it for the day? Okay, thanks everyone. Enjoy the weekend.
Thank you. Bye.
Thanks, you too.
Thanks.